The endgame is the most difficult part of the game to play. Precision is required, and I think what we would most benefit from is method to help us here. That's what I'm going to try and teach you. Now, I'm going to show you some simple techniques which I hope will help you to play the endgame better. Now, the first thing to realise is that the master cannot keep all the important endgames in his mind. Instead, he uses guidelines to help him work his way through the various positions he'll encounter at the board. And here for you now are those important master tips which will undoubtedly help you to improve your game.
A few moments later.
In the second section, we're going to learn what you should do when you're material ahead, and this is going to crop up a lot, let's face it. The most important thing to realise is if you're up in position or up in material, you've got to try and play carefully and safely. Consolidate, don't take risks. This is a key idea. I'd like to emphasise now how important it is to play simply when you've got the better position in an endgame. I mean, there's no point in taking any unnecessary risks, doing anything stupid. When you're material ahead or you've got the better position, just don't take any risks. Play simply. And here's a very good example of that from a top flight game between Svetozar Gligoric, the veteran Yugoslav Grandmaster, and Vasily Smyslov, world champion in the 50s. And this is from the great Zurich Candidates Tournament in 1953. It really is an excellent example of how to play a simple position, how to win your one position. Now just take a look at this game here. It's black to move. Black is actually a pawn up. It might not be too easy to win though, because the extra pawn is doubled, and these sorts of pawns are notoriously difficult to convert. But Smyslov makes it look very, very easy with a series of natural moves. Check out his first move, Rook fd8. Very simple. A move that makes sure of a presence on the open file and just threatening to exchange off the pieces. It's the simplest move. If all the pieces came off, black would stand to win with his extra pawn, so just swap off. What's the hassle? White, of course, wants to contest the file, and black hoovers the pieces off. Well, black would like to play Rook d8, but he can't just now, so he prepares Rook d8 by playing King f8. Another very simple idea. It's easy to understand once you see it. The king comes to the centre in the endgame. Black's not in a hurry, just improving the position of his pieces. Easy to understand chess. Well, white can't do very much. Plays f3 for two reasons. He first of all protects his pawn on e4, which enables him to move his knight. And as I've indicated, he threatens to transfer his own king to the centre with king f2 to e3. That was the best he could do under the circumstances. Out comes the black king, as we expected, and white brings his king across. This is typical endgame play. Well, now black has to form a plan. He could play Rook d8. I mean, that's a simple move again. It conforms with our idea. But Smyslov prefers to make a gain on the king side first before Rook d8. I think he's actually seeing that he can play Rook d8 whenever he likes, but it might not be possible to play just so at any stage of the game. Here the white rook is needed on the d file, so black has a majority of pawns on the king side. He's got 5 pawns to 3 on the king side, so it seems logical to try to push those pawns up and create a passed pawn before playing Rook d8. Well, as you can see, black is probably threatening to go h4 in this position, which will really tie white down. For this reason, white played Rook h2. And right on time, Smyslov comes out with another very fine move, Rook d8, taking the file that white just vacated. And we can see already that unhurriedly, black is improving his position. It's very simple play to understand. Now, I've highlighted the main ideas in this position. At all stages, white has got to be very careful that the black rook doesn't penetrate to either d4, d3 or d2. And there's an excellent highway there, right down to d1, if the white knight moves too far away. So, by playing Rook d8, black has actually accomplished many things with one move. Well, white can do nothing other than pass, so he just plays rook h1, nothing else to be done, and black continues with his plan of creating a pass pawn on the king side, or at the very least shattering the white pawn structure. Gligorich took on g4, knight takes g4 check, and now king e2. The king takes up a diagonal opposition to the knight, hoping that the black knight can't molest the king for a number of moves. On top of that, the white rook on h1 is attacking the pawn on h5, but after knight f6, king e3, black was able to improve his position still further by playing rook d4, which ties down the white knight. As you can see, knight and rook, the black knight and rook are trained on e4. The white knight is completely tied down. Alright, white passes. There comes a check. And now king f8. Again, Smyslov's playing with a plan. It's a very easy plan to understand. He's going to bring his king to g6, protecting the weak h-pawn, and then he's going to go f5. And by these means, he forces the creation of a pass pawn which is going to win in the game. White plays rook f3, the king comes up as indicated, and a desperate Gligorich offers the exchange of rooks. Well, not a lot to be done about this. King f6, off come the rooks, and white is hoping that that move is going to bail him out because he's attacking two black pawns. But unfortunately, we come now back to the lesson of the last example. The king is a strong piece in the endgame. Bang! The king goes to that beautiful square on e5. It's a marvellous position for the black king. And in order to only stay one pawn down, the white knight must head offside. So knight took on a7. Of course, that's way offside in this position. And notice how beautifully centralised black is. He's got a pass pawn, the better king. His knight is excellently positioned. I'm afraid it's all over for white. Okay, black's pawn on b6 comes under fire from the knight. Check, it's all a bit slow, and the king comes to d4 with the plan of knight e5 to f3 check, whereupon the pawn advances still further. Well, Gligorich tried something desperate, c5, simply took it off, and then knight e5. Game adjourned. In the old days they adjourned the games before computers, and white resigned. He's 2 pawns down for nothing. I would say throughout this example, Smyslov's play had an effortless quality to it, the hallmark of great endgame play. Now I'm determined to concentrate on top flight examples for you in these videos, so here's the finishing moves of the game Timon vs Kavalek, Montreal 1979. As with most of the positions on these videos, it's actually worthwhile taking time out, a few minutes, to just study each position before I explain what's going on. All I'll say at the moment is that black is a pawn up. Now this is one of these positions which, if you were black, it would be easy to get wrong. Why? Because white's got this incredibly strong pass pawn on d7, and black's got to find an effective way of either playing around this pawn or simply rounding it up. One way you can try to do this is to offer the exchange of pieces and hope later on to just pick up that pawn if he can. Kavalek tried to play as simply as possible with the move queen to f3. And this is a strong move, because if white now plays queen takes e5, which after all looks like the natural reply, then I think bishop b7 is an absolute crusher, when black's queen and bishop dominate the long diagonal down to the white king, and, well, white is in all sorts of trouble. For that reason, queen takes f3 is the only move, and then rook takes f3. First objective had been attained by black. He's got the queens off. White played knight c4. Bishop takes c4, more pieces coming off, and now rook to c3. Well, suddenly white's strong pawn on d7 doesn't look so strong anymore, because, well, it's not going anywhere at the moment, and black threatens to bring his king across to e7. The net effect of that king march would be to tie both the white rooks down and give black's other rook, the one on c3, a free hand. As you can see at the moment, he's actually threatening to take the pawn on c4 followed by the pawn on a4, when the armada of black pawns on the queen side would just march down the board. So whatever white does now, it better be pretty good. Tim had elected to jettison his pawn on d7 in favour of counterplay. He played rook e1, and strangely enough, rook takes c4 was the move. I mean, black could have moved his king across, but he preferred to just hoover some pawns off. Rook takes e5, and now king f7, just protecting the e7 square against infiltration. Rook came to d3, trying to activate the rook, and rook takes a4. So suddenly black is now 2 pawns up. Rook f3 was played, king g6, and now rook e7. This is actually Timman's last shot here. He's threatening rook d3 and then rook e8, hoping to promote his pawn. But Kovalek's next move was very accurate indeed. Rook came across to d4. Now both black rooks are trained on the pawn. White's got only one move to protect the pawn. He protects and attacks at the same time, but because of that beautiful rook on d4, black has got time for rook g8. In actual fact, all black's got to do really in this position is to protect his weaknesses, and then the 3 passed pawns on the queen side are going to do the job for him. So white's last few moves are rather abject and lead inexorably to defeat. Rook d8, simple enough move. Rook e6, king f5, and that is it. White resigned. The 3 passed pawns on the queen side are about to have their say. Again, a very simple example by black. He made it look easy. He exchanged off the pieces, and then he won the game in comfort.